The vast viewing portal of the Galactic Council station stretched across the entire eastern wall of Ambassador Frank Miller's quarters, offering an unobstructed view of the Andromeda spiral arm. Stars, scattered like diamonds against the infinite black, their light carrying stories of civilizations that had flourished for millennia before humanity had even discovered fire. Frank stood before this cosmic panorama, his reflection ghost-like against the stellar backdrop, watching as yet another day passed in what had become an exercise in diplomatic futility. 20 years, 2 decades since humanity had been grudgingly admitted to the Galactic Council as a junior member species, a designation that carried all the prestige of a participation trophy and half the respect. Frank had spent the last 5 of those years as Earth's primary ambassador to the Council, watching as proposal after proposal was dismissed with the casual indifference reserved for the suggestions of children. The communication device on his desk chirped with an incoming priority transmission from Earth. Frank turned away from the stars and activated the holographic display, watching as the familiar face of President Olivia Martinez materialized in the air before him. Her expression was grim, the kind of look that had become all too common in their recent conversations. "Frank," she said without preamble, "the fleet expansion request has been officially denied. Again." Frank felt his jaw tighten. What was their reasoning this time? The same patronizing nonsense we've heard before. Insufficient technological maturity, concerns about aggressive tendencies, and my personal favorite, the need for extended observation periods to ensure species stability. Martinez's voice carried a bitter edge that Frank recognized all too well. 20 years of observation apparently isn't enough for them. The ambassador moved to his desk and sank into his chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 58 years. And the colonial expansion proposal? Limited to 2 star systems. To Frank, the Zilthari get to expand to 12 new systems. This cycle the Vexari get 8, and we get 2. Martinez leaned forward in the hologram, her dark eyes flashing with anger. They're treating us like we're some kind of dangerous children who can't be trusted with sharp objects. Frank stared at the stack of reports on his desk, each one representing months of careful preparation, detailed analysis, and diplomatic finesse. All of it worthless in the face of the Council's predetermined biases. "There's something else, isn't there? I can see it in your face." Martinez hesitated for a moment, then nodded grimly. "Intelligence has uncovered something disturbing. Remember those joint research initiatives the Council keeps proposing? The ones where they want to study our unique approaches to technology. Of course, they've been pushing those programs for the past 3 years. They're not research initiatives, Frank. They're reverse engineering operations. We have evidence that at least 4 Council species have been systematically copying our technological innovations and passing them off as their own developments. The gravity manipulation systems, the quantum communication arrays, even our medical nanotechnology. All of it." The ambassador felt a cold fury building in his chest. For 20 years, humanity had played by the Council's rules, had accepted second-class status, in the hope that patience and good faith would eventually earn them respect and equality. Instead, they had been systematically robbed while being told they weren't worthy of the very technologies being stolen from them. "Mr. President," Frank said, his voice carefully controlled, "I think it's time we had that emergency session we've been discussing." 6 hours later, Frank found himself back on Earth for the first time in 8 months, sitting in the Situation Room beneath the White House, alongside the highest levels of the American government and representatives from the other major nations. The room buzzed with tension as President Martinez outlined the situation to the assembled leaders. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we stand at a crossroads. For 20 years we have honored our commitments to the Galactic Council. We have followed their rules, accepted their limitations, and sought to prove ourselves worthy of true membership. In return, we have been treated as inferiors, while our innovations have been systematically stolen, and our legitimate requests for expansion and defensive capabilities have been denied. Admiral Peter Collins, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward. Madam President, our intelligence suggests that without human technological contributions, several council species would still be struggling with problems they solved decades ago using our innovations. The Kepler 442 defense grid, for instance, is entirely based on human gravitational field manipulation technology. Which brings us to the heart of the matter, Martinez continued. We have two choices. We can continue to accept this treatment indefinitely, hoping that someday the Council will see fit to grant us the respect we've earned, or we can take action to demonstrate exactly what they stand to lose by continuing to treat us as second-class citizens. Frank cleared his throat. What are you proposing, Madam President? Martinez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Operation Exodus, a complete withdrawal of all human presence technology and expertise from Council space. Every ship, every piece of equipment, every database, every human citizen currently residing on Council worlds or stations. We bring it all home. The room fell silent. Dr. Sarah Chen from the State Department was the first to speak. The diplomatic implications would be enormous. We'd be burning every bridge we've built over the past 2 decades. What bridges? Admiral Collins asked bluntly. They've made it clear that they see us as junior partners at best, useful idiots at worst. Maybe it's time they learned what they're actually losing when they dismiss us. The question, said Secretary of Defense James Wright, is whether we can actually pull this off without triggering a military response from the Council. Frank had been studying the tactical reports during the flight from the Council station. Their military capabilities are impressive, but they're built around the assumption of defensive cooperation between member species. They rely heavily on integrated systems, many of which now incorporate human technology. If we withdraw our components, their defensive networks would collapse, Admiral Collins finished. The irony is delicious. They've become so dependent on our innovations that they can't maintain their own security without us. President Martinez stood and moved to the large display screen, showing a map of known galactic territories. Operation Exodus will proceed in 3 phases. Phase 1, complete withdrawal of all human personnel from Council space. Phase 2, remote deactivation of all human design technology currently integrated into Council systems. Phase 3, formal declaration of independence from Council authority and establishment of an autonomous human sphere of influence. The timeline, asked Frank. 6 months for complete withdrawal. We'll announce our intention to leave the Council in 3 months, giving them time to realize what they're losing and potentially reconsider their position. If they want to negotiate in good faith, the door will be open. If not, Martinez shrugged, they'll learn to get by without us. Over the following weeks, Operation Exodus began to take shape. Captain Samantha West of the USS Defiant received orders to begin discreet evacuation of human personnel from the Outer Rim colonies. Dr. Lisa Dawson and her team started the delicate process of identifying and cataloging every piece of human technology integrated into Council systems, preparing for the eventual shutdown sequence. Meanwhile, Frank returned to the Council station to maintain the facade of normal diplomatic relations while secretly coordinating the withdrawal. It was during a routine Council session that he first noticed the signs that something was amiss. Councillor Zilthar of the Hegemony, a species that had been among the founding members of the Council, was presenting the quarterly defense report when several of his displays began showing error messages. The Zilthari's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of confusion and agitation. Technical difficulties, Zilthar announced to the Assembly. We will adjourn briefly while the issues are resolved. Frank watched as technicians scurried around the Council chambers, their movements becoming increasingly frantic as more systems began to malfunction. He kept his expression carefully neutral, even as he felt a grim satisfaction building in his chest. The remote shutdown of human-designed components had begun ahead of schedule. 3 days later, President Martinez made the announcement that would reshape galactic politics forever. My fellow humans, she said, broadcasting simultaneously to Earth and every human installation throughout Council space. Today, We declare our independence from the Galactic Council. For 20 years, we have sought to be partners in a community of civilizations. Instead, we have been treated as subjects, our contributions dismissed, and our capabilities stolen. No more. The reaction from the Council was swift and predictable. Within hours, Frank received a priority communication from Counselor Zilthar, demanding an explanation for the technical sabotage that was affecting systems throughout Council space. Ambassador Miller. Zilthar's synthesized voice carried none of its usual condescending tone. Your species' hasty actions are causing significant disruptions to vital systems. This behavior is unbecoming of a council member and may necessitate corrective action. Frank smiled as he activated the response transmission. Counselor Zilthar Humanity is no longer a council member. As of this morning, we have formally withdrawn from the Galactic Council and revoked all previous agreements and treaties. Any systems disruptions you're experiencing are the natural result of our reclaiming our intellectual property. This is preposterous. Zilthar's image flickered, whether from the poor connection or from rage, Frank couldn't tell. You cannot simply leave the council. There are procedures, protocols, which you might have mentioned during the 20 years we spent trying to gain equal treatment through proper channels, Frank interrupted. I'm afraid the time for procedures has passed, Counselor. Humanity will no longer be bound by agreements that treat us as inferiors, while our innovations prop up your civilization. The next few months passed in a blur of activity as Operation Exodus reached full implementation. Human colonies throughout Council space were evacuated, their populations relocated to Earth, or the handful of human-controlled systems. More importantly, every piece of human technology was either physically removed or remotely deactivated. The effects were devastating to Council infrastructure. The Kepler 442 defense grid, protecting one of the most important trade routes in Council space, went offline when its human-designed gravitational field generators shut down. Communication networks spanning dozens of systems failed as quantum relay stations lost their human-built components. Even basic life support systems on some Council stations began to malfunction as their human-enhanced efficiency algorithms stopped functioning. Frank watched the chaos unfold from Earth, where he had been appointed as the new Secretary of State in humanity's post-Council government. Reports flowed in daily from their intelligence networks, painting a picture of a galactic civilization in crisis. The true test came 18 months after the Exodus began. The Vraxian hegemony had been a persistent threat to Council space for decades, kept at bay by the elaborate network of early warning stations and defensive grids that protected the outer territories. These raiders were notorious for their hit-and-run tactics, striking at isolated colonies and trade convoys before disappearing back into the galactic void. What they hadn't counted on was that the Council's early warning network had become heavily dependent on human sensor technology and predictive algorithms. When those systems went offline during the Exodus, massive gaps appeared in the defensive perimeter that had protected Council space for generations. The attack came without warning. Vraxian raiders, exploiting the sensor gaps left by the shutdown of human technology, struck deep into Council territory. What should have been detected hours in advance became a complete surprise, allowing the raiders to penetrate to the very heart of civilized space. The Council station itself came under attack for the first time in its 1,000-year history. Frank was in his office in Washington when the priority transmission came through. The face that appeared in the holographic display was one he had never expected to see again, Chancellor Vexoma of the Zarian Collective, one of the more moderate voices on the Council and the closest thing humanity had to an ally among the member species. Secretary Miller. Vexoma began, her crystalline features showing signs of obvious distress. I am transmitting on behalf of the Galactic Council Emergency Assembly. We require assistance. Frank leaned back in his chair, studying the alien diplomat, who had once been willing to listen to human concerns, even if she had rarely acted on them. Chancellor Vexoma, this is unexpected. I was under the impression that the Council considered humanity to be dangerous children unworthy of equal treatment. Vexoma's expression shifted to what Frank recognized as the Zarian equivalent of shame. Secretary Miller, we have made grave errors in our treatment of your species. The current crisis has made it clear that we have not fully appreciated the extent of humanity's contributions to Council civilization. The current crisis? Frank asked, though he suspected he already knew what she was referring to. The Vraxian assault has penetrated to the core systems. Without the early warning networks, our defensive response has been inadequate. The raiders have struck at 17 major installations and show no signs of withdrawing. Worse, our analysis suggests they are using the same sensor gaps to position for a larger offensive. Frank felt no satisfaction in her words, only a grim understanding of the situation's gravity. The Vraxians were ruthless, and if they had indeed penetrated to the Council's core systems, the civilian casualties would be enormous. What exactly are you asking of us, Chancellor? The Council formally requests that humanity consider providing assistance in addressing the current security crisis. In return, we are prepared to offer significant revisions to the terms of human membership in the Galactic Council, including Vexoma took what Frank recognized as a deep breath. Full voting rights, unrestricted colonial expansion rights, complete technological sovereignty, and formal recognition of humanity as a founding-level member species with all associated privileges. Frank was quiet for a long moment, considering the offer. It was everything humanity had sought for 20 years offered now, only because the Council had discovered exactly how much they needed human capabilities. Chancellor, he said finally, humanity is no longer interested in membership in the Galactic Council. Vexoma's features showed shock. Secretary Miller, surely. However, Frank continued, we are not without compassion for the innocent civilians who are suffering because of this crisis. President Martinez has authorized me to propose an alternative. I am listening. The Treaty of Earth, a new framework for galactic cooperation based on true equality between species. Not a hierarchical council with founding members and junior partners, but a genuine alliance of sovereign civilizations. Frank activated his desk display and transmitted a document that had been months in preparation. You'll find the terms outlined in detail, but the key points are these. Each member species maintains complete sovereignty over their territory and technology. Mutual defense agreements based on consent rather than obligation. Shared research initiatives with equal partnership and benefit sharing. And rotating leadership of alliance institutions. Vexoma studied the document for several minutes before looking up. This would require the complete dissolution of the existing council structure. Yes, it would. The question, Chancellor, is whether the council species are willing to accept true equality in exchange for human assistance, or whether they prefer to maintain their artificial hierarchy while the Vraxians tear apart everything they've built. The next week was a blur of frantic negotiations as the Vraxian assault intensified. Reports reached Earth of massive battles throughout Council space as the raiders, emboldened by their initial success, launched an all-out offensive aimed at crippling galactic civilization. During this time, Frank found himself in the unusual position of negotiating with desperate former colleagues who had spent years dismissing human concerns. Chancellor Vexoma proved to be a capable intermediary, but even she struggled to convince the more traditional council members to accept the radical restructuring that the Treaty of Earth demanded. The breakthrough came when Councillor Grell of the Zarian Collective presented surveillance footage of a Vraxian assault on the Tau Ceti research station. The images were horrific: civilian evacuation ships being systematically destroyed, research facilities reduced to burning wreckage, thousands of innocent beings killed or captured for slave labor. This is what our pride has cost us, Grell announced to the emergency session. We allowed our prejudices to blind us to the capabilities of a species that has proven itself time and again. Now, our stubbornness may cost us our civilization. The vote was closer than Frank had hoped, but decisive nonetheless. 17 council species voted to dissolve the existing framework and sign the Treaty of Earth. Only 3 traditionalist species voted against, and they quickly found themselves isolated as their own worlds came under Vraxian assault. President Martinez herself came to the council station for the signing ceremony, an event that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. As she put her signature to the document that would reshape galactic politics, she looked up at the assembled representatives of a dozen different species. "This treaty represents more than just an alliance," she said. "It represents a recognition that true strength comes not from hierarchy and dominance, but from cooperation between equals. Humanity is proud to be a founding member of this new alliance, and we look forward to standing alongside our partners in defense of freedom and civilization." The immediate crisis required swift action. Within days of the treaty signing, human fleets were moving through council space, their advanced sensor arrays and gravitational manipulation drives, giving them capabilities that the Vraxians had never faced before. The USS Defiant, under Captain West's command, led a task force that caught a Vraxian assault fleet completely off guard, using human stealth technology to position themselves for a devastating surprise attack. More importantly, human engineers worked around the clock to restore the early warning networks that protected the outer territories. Dr. Dawson's team, the same group that had orchestrated the shutdown of human technology during the Exodus, now worked to reintegrate their systems into a new alliance framework that gave humanity equal control and ownership. The war with the Vraxians lasted another 6 months, but the outcome was never in doubt once humanity's full capabilities were brought to bear. The Raiders found themselves facing not the divided and technologically dependent council they had expected, but a unified alliance armed with innovations they couldn't counter. Frank stood once again before the great viewing portal, in what had been his quarters on the council station, now serving as Earth's embassy to the Galactic Alliance. The view was the same magnificent spread of stars and spiral arms, but everything else had changed. Where once he had felt the weight of futile hope and frustrated ambition, he now felt the satisfaction of having helped bring about true change. A soft chime announced an incoming communication. Frank turned to see Chancellor Vexoma's image materializing in his office space. "Secretary Miller," she said, "I wanted to personally thank you for your patience during the transition period. The new alliance structure is working better than many of us had hoped." "Chancellor," Frank replied with a genuine smile, "I think we've all learned something valuable about the importance of treating partners as equals rather than subjects. The alliance is stronger because every member has a real voice in its direction." "Indeed. And I must admit the technological innovations that have emerged from true collaborative research have exceeded anything we achieved under the old system. When species are free to contribute their best ideas without fear of theft or dismissal, remarkable things become possible." Frank nodded, thinking of the joint human-Zerian quantum computational project that had revolutionized faster-than-light communication, or the human Vexari medical research that had led to breakthrough treatments for previously incurable diseases. Equal partnership had indeed proven more productive than the old hierarchy. "There is one more thing," Vexoma continued. "The Vraxian delegation has requested to open formal discussions about joining the alliance. Their defeat has led to significant political changes in their society, and they claim to be interested in abandoning their raiding culture in favor of legitimate trade and cooperation." Frank raised an eyebrow. "That's unexpected. What's your assessment?" "Cautious optimism. Their defeat was so complete that continuing their traditional raiding would be suicide. They have resources and technological capabilities that could benefit the Alliance if they can truly commit to peaceful cooperation." "The founding principles of the Alliance are clear," Frank said. "Any species that abandons aggression and commits to peaceful cooperation is welcome to apply for membership. They'll need to prove their sincerity, but the door should remain open." As the communication ended, Frank returned to his contemplation of the stars. Somewhere out there, among those distant lights, were civilizations, yet to be contacted species that might someday face the same choice that humanity had confronted: accept inferior treatment or fight for equality. He hoped that the example of the Galactic Alliance would provide a better model, one where every species could contribute their unique gifts to the common good, without sacrificing their dignity or sovereignty. The lesson had been hard-learned and costly, but it was now written in the new treaty that governed galactic civilization. True strength comes not from dominance, but from cooperation between equals. The stars continued their ancient dance across the cosmos, but for the first time in 20 years, Frank Miller watched them with hope rather than frustration. Humanity had found its place among the civilizations of the galaxy, not as junior partners or subject species, but as equals in a grand alliance dedicated to the principles of freedom, cooperation, and mutual respect. It had taken a dramatic exodus and a brutal war to reach this point, but perhaps that was the price of true change. Sometimes, Frank reflected, you had to be willing to walk away from a bad situation before others would realize just how much they had to lose. As he prepared to return to Earth for the first annual meeting of the Galactic Alliance Council, Frank allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The lonely years of diplomatic frustration were over. Humanity had not only found its voice among the stars, but had helped create a framework where every voice could be heard. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities that would have been unimaginable under the old council system. New worlds to explore, new species to befriend, new technologies to develop together as partners, rather than as masters and subjects. Frank Miller smiled as he looked out at the infinite expanse of space, knowing that somewhere among those distant stars, other species were learning that the choice between domination and cooperation was really no choice at all. In the end, the only sustainable path forward was the one they all walked together as equals. The exodus was over. The real journey was just beginning.